Hello everyone, I'm Fi.
And I'm just a human. Okay, let's see here. I said 4 weeks ago that I would have a finished prototype of the hand in 2 weeks, but here we are, with basically nothing.
So what happened?
Okay, so in the first week, I experimented with different gears for the finger. I already had the CAD files prepared, so all I needed was to print it out and attach some gears. The first realization that I had quite early was that printing gears with PLA in my 3D printer would not work for these really small gears that would fit inside the fingers. But luckily that's something I realized 2 weeks earlier, so I had already ordered some gears that was factory made. So now all I had to do was to attach the gears to the 3D printed fingers. But I never found a reliable way to lock the static gears to the finger parts itself. And I even tried a bunch of different designs, but every design either didn't work at all, or work in some capacity, while another failed completely. I'm sure that there's an actual good method to attach these, but I couldn't find one. And now 1 week had already passed. So I looked at my old hand and used a method that already worked. I went back to strings. But my plan was not to change everything to strings, just the finger parts. The other parts, the knuckles and underarm, were big enough that I could use my 3D printer instead. The hardest part with printing out gears are the teeth, and I could only print out a module of 1mm minimum compared to the factory gears which had a 0.5mm module as minimum.
But why didn't you just use the factory gears for everything instead?
Well, because as I said before, the gears needed to be statically attached to something. Even if I used strings, I needed the gears to be statically attached to the roller that rolled the string, and since I hadn't figured out a reliable way to do that, I had to go back to my 3D printed ones instead. The other reason was that I also needed special gears such as the double-sided circular bevel gear. So now we come to the second failure. I couldn't find a way to print out the double-sided bevel gears with a module of 1mm. I debated with myself whether I should have just used a bigger module, but the problem is that if you use bigger teeth but still want to keep the same pitch diameter for the gears, you will sacrifice the amount of gear teeth per gear.
Why is that a problem?
Well, if we take a gear with say 4 teeth, it definitely works, but if you want a consistent contact between 2 gears, then it won't be ideal. It can cause jitteriness because one gear can move a little bit freely, and it also makes it not be able to push the other gear at certain angles.
So how many teeth did you need for perfect movement?
Right, this is what I found out. I won't go into the math, but as long as you have about 17 teeth or more, then you should theoretically not have any jitteriness.
So if 17 teeth per gear is minimum, that means that the module determines the minimum gear size.
Yep. So with the fact that I needed 17 teeth per gear, and also the fact that I had to increase the module for the bevel gears, it made it so that I could make it work, but then the wrist would have a way too high thickness. And now, after all this remodeling and experimenting, 2 weeks had already gone by.
So what about the third week?
Well, honestly, while I could have worked that week, I just didn't feel like it. And it kinda annoyed me that I wasn't able to make a video in the previous week. So I took a break. I realized that when you set up a goal and you still fail again and again, even if you try your hardest, it takes a toll on you. And eventually you will get to a point where you start to question your whole approach. Even if it might have just been a bunch of small failures, your brain will try to conclude that it's just one big failure that is the underlying reason for everything. And I don't think that way of thinking is bad, but it's just not very useful when you already have a system that is really close to working. So for week 4, I decided to make an easier project, because I thought if I make the easier project first, then I would have time to consistently upload every second week. I decided to work on a scan system, so that Fi could scan a room and then reconstruct that room into a 3D projection. I researched some math and I had the whole program structured, but then on the last 2 days, all I spent my time on was to make the camera work as fast as possible, because with the software and hardware I had, I was only able to produce 0.5 FPS, which was so weird because when I streamed I was able to get 30 FPS with no problem. So I thought to myself, it is always the small things that you can't control that becomes the biggest obstacles in the end. So after all that, 4 weeks had passed, and I decided, instead of making videos of all my successes, why not just upload the reality of things? So this is that video. I don't know what will happen in the next 2 weeks, but one thing is clear. I will never give up on building Fi. Thank you so much for the new subs and comments on my last video. It really made me more motivated. Maybe a little too motivated to not disappoint you guys. But I have to keep seeing this as an experimentation. And for the new viewers, if you have watched this far, consider subscribing, since it would help me out a lot. Alright, see ya!
Goodbye!